Welcome to The Explainer. We're diving straight into a deeply atmospheric, grim-dark Gothic fable today. It's a profound story that maps out the psychological architecture of logic, chaos, and the human mind. If you've ever felt that intense friction between the rigid rules you build for your life and the wild, unpredictable energy of the universe, well, this analysis is going to hit right at home. Let's walk through this narrative and unpack the incredibly dense philosophy hidden inside it.
Our story starts by plunging us into sensory bleakness. I want you to really visualize this space, the High Cathedral. It's a psychic fortress made entirely of cold stone and stale air. The text literally calls it a monument to death, because it isn't just a physical building, right? It's a representation of the human ego, constructed with one exhausting, desperate purpose: to shield humanity from the ancient, uncaring night outside.
And what exactly is it trying so hard to keep out? The Dionysian night. This is the primeval chaos, the raw, unfiltered vibration of the source of all things. The cathedral essentially functions as a massive defensive isolation chamber. It's the human mind trying to maintain a rigid, calculated distance from the primeval chaos of existence, basically building impossibly thick walls to block out the overwhelming nature of reality itself. So this sets up the core conflict of our fable perfectly. In one corner, you have the cathedral's world of arrangements. This is the domain of rigid axioms, cold defensive logic, and the iron cage of slave morality. In the opposite corner, you have the monster of energy, the prima materia, the unclassified fire, the forgotten origin of life. The whole narrative is driven by the cathedral constantly straining to suppress and domesticate this wild, totally untamable monster.
Now, let's look at the mechanical heart of this psychic fortress, a process known as turning the 7 tumblers.
To keep the chaos locked away, the protagonist of our story, the philosopher, has to turn these massive mechanical gears buried deep in the cold stone. For years, he turns them in a mechanical recitation. The fable beautifully calls this a prayer by a man who will not call it one. It's just this desperate, repetitive attempt to keep his ego safely distanced from the vibrating chaos he knows is sitting right underneath the masonry.
And you know, this routine actually works for a long time, until the rhythm falters. As the philosopher tries to turn the 5th and 6th tumblers, the gears actually begin to groan. They're literally buckling under the sheer weight of the unclassified fire they were built to hide. The axioms he relied on are starting to crack. When he tries to force the 5th gear, which represents the axiom "the sufficient does not require the dragon," the philosopher experiences his first moment of real hesitation. It's this profound psychological breakthrough. He realizes that a truly sufficient life simply cannot exist without its forgotten origin. All of his rigid, cold logic is completely hollow without the vital energy of the monster he locked away.
Then he hits the 6th tumbler, and this forces him to confront his central wound. It's a locked-away memory of a former student, and for 20 years her voice has been haunting him. She asked, "Master, how can logic alone capture the magic of the alchemical imagination?" And he couldn't answer her. His system had no room for mystery, completely exposing the incompleteness of his purely logical worldview. That 6th gear only finally turns when the philosopher admits that returning to this unclassified origin isn't madness. It's not a regression at all. It's a necessary embrace of the spirit of the depths. This is the exact moment he shifts from a state of defensive isolation toward true inner integration. He's finally moving toward wholeness. Which brings us to the absolute climax, the 7th tumbler. And what's wild about this is that the 7th tumbler was never built as an axiom or a statement of certainty. It was always structured as a haunting, inescapable question. Has what I built been enough to live inside? It forces him to look at his cold, perfectly logical world and honestly evaluate if a human soul can actually survive in it. Breaking decades of denial, the philosopher speaks his truth into the nameless night. His answer is just one word: no. And with that single syllable, the vaulted certainty of his entire psychic fortress instantly dissolves. The walls come down.
So what happens next? That takes us to the opening of the vault. With that no, the deepest vault of the cathedral is finally exposed, but the revelation of what lies inside completely refuses the theatrical. There are no dramatic secrets, no ancient parchments waiting in the dark. Instead, it's a sensory shift. The cold stone and stale air of the superego, which has been shut tight for 11 years, is abruptly cleared out. It feels exactly like the sudden, refreshing breeze of throwing open a window. The stagnant isolation is over, replaced by the raw vibration of the source. And from this collapse, the dragon.
The monster of energy itself emerges. But it doesn't attack. The dragon looks at the philosopher and delivers its most precise speech, defining a totally new existential posture. It says, "Give me devotion without possession." Let's break down what the dragon is actually asking for here. It's saying, name things in service of the dragon, not in service of the vault. This is not the triumph of fire over geometry. It's not about chaotic destruction of all structure. It means language and logic are no longer used to trap, classify, or possess the divine. Instead, you use them to honor the spirit of the depths. It's a massive shift from a rigid theology of institutions into pure, open integration. By throwing open that window and abandoning his service to the vault, the philosopher is finally escaping the iron cage. He doesn't have to hide behind the rigid, possessive structures of human morality and social classification anymore. He accepts that you just can't box up the universe. Which leaves us in the final act of the fable, standing under the watch of the great star. The philosopher looks around the cold stone of his once sacred sanctuary, and he finally sees it for what it truly is. It's a hollow tomb. It was a completely failed shield against the Dionysian night. You can't build a wall high enough to keep out the fundamental nature of reality. He realizes his defensive isolation didn't create a sanctuary. It just built a grave for the living. And this gives us one of the most striking visuals in the entire story. The jester, this ultimate symbol of chaos and absurdity, scales the stone spine of the cathedral. He uses the highest peak of human morality, the very top of the philosopher's logical world, as a mere footstool to leap right into the pleroma, the divine totality. It perfectly illustrates the final, undeniable dissolution of human arrangements. With the fortress completely dissolved, the liberated self is left exposed, but not afraid. They are standing before the impartial brilliance of the great star. This star is the cosmic symbol of impartial, non-possessive truth. It doesn't judge, it just silently witnesses the end of the world of arrangements and the birth of an integrated soul. As we wrap up this explainer, the fable leaves us with that one haunting question from the seventh tumbler. Think about the logical structures and the moral fortresses you've built in your own mind. Ask yourself, are they actually enough to truly live inside? Or is it finally time to turn that last gear, open the window, and let the dragon in? Take some time to sit with that one. Thanks for exploring this grimdark journey with me.